Growing up, I was always interested in the mental game. After years of study, I developed the BasketballBrain program. My life is devoted to helping others achieve their greatness. I hope you'll like, subscribe, and if you take a chance with the BasketballBrain program, I promise you your game's going to reach levels that you never thought possible.
So a few people asked me to do a video on Julian Newman. The first thing that stands out when you look at Julian Newman, let's just be honest, is his size. So let me tell you a little story about my basketball history. I tried out for the United States Basketball League, a team in Florida called the Florida Sea Dragons. Now this was the NBDL before there was the NBDL or the G League. There was the United States Basketball League and the Continental Basketball League, if I'm correct. Anyways, there was a tryout. So I went, and at these tryouts, you have to pay $125, right? So I don't know how many guys are there. It's been a long time ago. It was more than 20 years ago. And I go there, and my mentality was, I'm just going to let it fly. I'd been playing a little bit of pickup the week before, but that's it. Nothing. I'm out of shape. We get there. There's a lot of guys who played D1 basketball, because the guys who didn't make it to the NBA had two options. You go play overseas, or you play for the USBL or the CBL or I think it was Continental Basketball League or CBA, something like that. So there were a lot of great players there. There was a 7-footer there, and there were some other guys who had played D1 who were a little taller than me, 6'1", 6'2", I think, somewhere around there. Anyway, some good competition. Well, I go out there and we run wind sprints. They're just trying to see who's in shape. And I go out there and I get hot and I start making shots, and I'm making them with guys in my face. Now, this team in Florida, the Florida Sea Dragons, was new to the area. And the press was there to cover these open tryouts for the team. And one of the guys covering the open tryouts used to cover me in high school. So he came up to me and he said, Dylan, I wrote articles about you in high school. It's awesome. Where have you been? Why'd you quit playing? And I kind of told him, I'm more interested in entrepreneurship. I kind of lost my interest to play once I was recruited. Now, I know that sounds like BS, but it was true. All I wanted to ever do was get attention from D1 colleges. That's all I wanted to do. And when I was done with, my friends loved basketball, man. They loved it. They loved to play all the time. I love basketball, but I didn't love it like them. And I didn't want my whole life to be about basketball. I was always interested in psychology and writing and starting businesses. That was really my passion. I love sports, but this is what I told him, and I kind of lost my motivation to, once I started getting a little bit of attention, it's kind of like a girl you're chasing. Once you get her attention, you don't even really have to have her after that. It's like I kind of got what I wanted. And that's how I felt with basketball. That's the honest truth. I suppose if I could have went to the NBA, I would have kept playing, because I never liked college basketball. I didn't like how involved the coaches were. I didn't like zone defenses. I liked one-on-one play. You could be a little more selfish in a professional game. And that's what intrigued me to go try out for this semi-pro team, whatever you want to call it. So I go out there, I get hot, and the old reporter comes over to me and he says, where you been? I told him all of that. He said, look, the coach is really looking at you. The coach's name was Coach Mackey, Kevin Mackey, I think. And he had coached at Cleveland State and coached Cleveland State to the Final Four. But then he got in some trouble with the NCAA for something, and he ended up coaching in the United States Basketball League, and he was the head coach of the Florida Sea Dragons. So I go out there, and I'm making all of my shots, and he sends a bunch of people home, and I'm there for the final run. So in my mind, I'm thinking, hey, I have a chance to make it here. And there were some other really good players there, and I played really well in the final run, and he pulls me aside, and he says, why aren't you playing in college? You should be playing in college. And I said, I kind of told him the same thing. College isn't really my thing. I'd consider it. But, I'm not that interested in college basketball, and I want to move to a city. And I ended up moving to New York shortly after. So anyways, he gives me this talk, and he says, listen, now here's where it gets to Julian Newman, okay? As I'm talking to him, he's telling me, you can really shoot it. You can pass if you need to, which is kind of funny. I never passed. I wasn't a ball. I shot a lot, okay? I was a shooting guard. It's in the name. So he says, listen, and he points to the 7-footer or 6'11", whatever the guy was. And I was a much better basketball player than this tall guy, which you guys could probably relate to, like a lot better. I was scoring on him. He's going up for rebounds. He's dropping the ball. I'm getting steals from him. And I'm guarding the other guys, the other guards there very well. And to make a long story short, he says, listen, I can teach him to shoot. I can't teach you to be 6'7" or 6'11", whatever it was. And I looked at him, I said, you can't teach him to shoot as good as me. I was a little cocky. The coach laughed and he said, that's true, but let me tell you something else. He said, number one, go back to college and play, and then you call me. Once you're done with college, you call me and I'll help you play overseas. I'll help you, do something maybe here. Wherever I can help you, you're good enough to play at a professional level. You definitely need to play a little more college ball, tighten up parts of your game, but you can play at this level, okay? Which boosted my ego. But then he said, listen, I'm going to tell you something, right? He said, you want to be a shooting guard. You got to play point. This was before Steph Curry and everything. You got to play point guard. You got to quit trying to score so much. I know you can, but if you're going to play pro ball, they're not going to let you, and you're a liability on defense. So then he says, okay, let me give you an example. If average height in professional and Division I basketball was the average height in the regular world, like 6'6", 6'7", whatever it is. He goes, what are you? I'm like 5'11", 6, I always said 6 foot. I'm like 5'11 and a half, whatever. And he said, what's the average height in the world right now? I was like, in the US, I'm like 5'9", 5'10". He said, okay, imagine you're 6-7 inches shorter than 5'9", 5'10". You're 5'3", you're almost a legal midget. That's what he told me. When you're that small, you're almost considered a legal midget. And when you play basketball, you're sort of a midget. This was back when, I think there was a different term used now, but this was 2001 or something. I don't know when it was, 2002. It wasn't as big a deal to say, it was proper to say that. So I'm not trying to be disrespectful or anything. So I never forgot that. He said, you have to recognize you're a midget. Now, I look at Julian Newman, who's shorter than I am, and he's trying to play Division I basketball. And he's a scorer, so I can start to relate to what he's going through. And when he plays bigger teams, longer teams, he's having a problem. Now, there are exceptions to this rule. There's Muggsy Bogues, there's JJ Barea, there's guys like that. But what you notice with them is superhuman free quickness. Muggsy Bogues was super strong, and he played point, not a big scorer. JJ Barea could shoot, could score, but he's more of a point. So if you're going to be that size, one, you got to be a point. Julian Newman has to change his name so he's a point guard, my estimation. He can score when he's called upon to do it, but unless you're Iverson, you can't score at that height. Now, Iverson, here's what I want you guys to do, and I've talked about this before. Now, I've watched basketball for a long time. I've played basketball longer than a lot of you guys have been alive. Consider that, okay? I'm almost 40. I started playing seriously when I was 14 years old. So it's been a long time I've been playing basketball and watching basketball. And you start to notice certain things. So like the smaller guys who make it are either superhumanly quick or they have super long arms. A few of the tryouts I went to, they never measured your height. They just kind of asked you how tall you were. If you were a really tall guy, they measured you. But if you're about 6 foot, you could say, hey, I'm about 6 foot. Okay? But they would measure your wingspan. They wanted to see how wide you were. Because if you're 6 foot, but you got a 6'6" wingspan, does it really matter that you're not 6'6"? Not really, unless somebody's trying to post you up. And there's ways to get around that with defensive schemes. But if you watch Allen Iverson dunk, go do this after this. Watch him dunk and watch when he lets go of the rim. He barely drops from the rim. He drops 6 inches, it seems like. Because his arms are so long, okay? When you drop from the rim, if you've hung on the rim and you're 5'11", 6 foot, or even shorter, that's a drop. Once you grab the rim and you let go, that's a pretty far drop. My standing reach was like 7'7". So if I had, my highest tested vert was like 39 inches, okay? So at 39 inches, and that's not a one step, that was a little bit of a running vert. So I was almost at 40. I probably in a game got 40 a few times. So think about it. If my standing reach is 7'7", and I go 3 feet above that, I'm 7 inches above the rim. I have a good vertical. I have a pretty damn good vertical, right? And I'm only 7 inches above the rim. On my best jump, I'm 10 inches above the rim, which allows you to dunk it, on an oop right in front of the rim, and maybe I was pretty good off one leg, a hard throw down. But that's about it, But if you're 6'6", and you have a 8'6", reach or something, who knows? You're 36 inches off you're way above the rim, okay? So Watch Iverson, great vert too on top of that, but he had these long arms, which negated some of the fact that he's not that short. The other thing I would say, this is turning into a rant about height, but it's important. And I'm going to get deeper into Julian Newman, but I just wanted to do this just to kind of intro, and then I'm going to go in a little bit more into his game in another video. But you always hear how small Steph Curry is, how small Derrick Rose is. Listen, if you've ever been beside those guys, they're not your average like 6'2" or 6'3". They're big 6'2s and 6'3s. Their constitution is different, okay? I'm reality based here. They're bigger human beings. They're like not as dense, but they're, it's weird. Steph Curry's bigger than you think. And the other thing I want you to notice when you're walking down the street, I live in New York City, which has a massive population, especially Manhattan. It's very dense. Do you know how many guys I pass on the train that are a legitimate 6'3" or taller? Very few. And then if we get up to 6'6" and taller, maybe twice a week I see somebody legitimately 6'6" and taller. So as you go up, here's what happens. As you get taller, coaches notice you more. As you get taller, especially around 6'3", 6'4", okay, you're basically big enough to play at any level. That helps. If you still can move okay and jump okay, you really are ahead of the game. The other thing is, when you're 6'3" or 6'4", you don't really have to concern yourself with being a liability on defense, okay? And you're out of that, quote unquote, midget zone. And when you're 6'3" or 6'4", think about this. So if that's where the bulk of players are coming from, above 6'3", and you're walking out in the world and there's very few players taller than 6'3", the number of people you have to beat out to make it to college or the pros is substantially smaller, okay? Like, when you're 5'11", you have to beat every other 5'11", every other 6 foot. If you're shorter than that, like Julian Newman, you have to beat out everybody who's taller than you. A lot of basketball is just beating out people who are, every inch you go up, it's really, there's a lot fewer competitors you have to deal with in the scout's eyes. There are exceptions. There's a lot of exceptions. I recognize that. But generally speaking, being taller is better. Being shorter is worse in the game of basketball. I know it's common sense, and I know you guys agree, but I'm just telling you, I've been through it. You go in and you're already looked down upon for being that you could have all the game in the world, be able to shoot the lights out. And some good coaches and some great scouts are going to see you. But the deck is stacked against you. Now, you got to love that. You got to want that. You have to accept that. Treasure it, actually. Like that's your secret weapon. You can sneak out, get a lot of steals. You can sneak around. You're usually a little quicker. You're feistier. You got a chip on your shoulder. You got that Chris Paul attitude. You need all of that. But when I look at Julian Newman, it's his size that jumps out at me. And he's going to have to change his game a little bit. A lot of bit, maybe. Some guys can be successful at that size and play well and score and all of that and keep their game the same. We'll see. I expect him to have some decent games. He might not see a lot of playing time his first year, but let's see what happens with him in college. I'm pulling for him. He's a little bit cocky. We're going to get into that, and that's that chip on the shoulder. You got to be a little psycho. You got to be a little bit different when you're that small if you're going to get somebody's attention. I get it. Question is, does he go too far and throw himself out of the zone? Does he pull the Russell Westbrook and overtry, and or the Kobe route and try to shoot himself into the game and ends up shooting his team out of the game? I've done that before. I'd rather have a guy like that who's like, just give me the ball and let's go for it. I do like that, but that's not mastery. That's a great attitude, but you also have to have mastery of the game and let the game come to you. I want to get into all of that with him, but I thought I'd do a little video on height and from my perspective when, I tried to play in the USBL and didn't make it. And it hurt me when I was being recruited. Everything. It makes sense. You can't hate the coaches for that. It makes sense. If you can get taller guys, you get taller guys. My high school coach told me, Joe Consolino down in Florida. I had a good game my junior year. I don't know how many points I had, maybe 30. We blew the team out 30 points, and it was a good team, and I shot well. And he looked me dead in the eye, and he said, if you were 6'3", the big schools would come knocking. The way if you were 6'3", 6'4", Duke and North Carolina would come. He told me that. I believed him, and I needed to. I need somebody to tell me things like that. But it also, again, there was another coach saying your height's a problem. So if you're a shorter guy It doesn't mean you can't make it. It means the road ahead of you is tougher. It means you have a lot of obstacles you have to overcome. And God willing, with hard work, a little bit of luck, a lot of mental training, you will make it. Maybe it's not D1, maybe it's D2, maybe it's D3, maybe it's NAIA, maybe it's a community college first. Don't give up on your dreams. Keep going, but recognize, sorry, the table around me is shaking. That's that noise you keep hearing. Recognize that it's going to take a little more, but feed off of that. Add it to your fuel list. This is Dylan. Please like, subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Talk to you soon.